What if I told you that every war you're watching on the news, every economic shock, every political crisis unfolding right now in 2026 might not be random events colliding in chaos? What if what looks like disorder is actually something closer to a pattern? And what if the people you see standing behind podiums, presidents, prime ministers, generals, and billionaires, were not the true authors of that pattern at all? Imagine for a moment that global politics is less like a battlefield and more like a stage. A stage where powerful figures step forward, deliver their speeches, make dramatic decisions, and appear to shape the fate of nations. But behind that stage, far beyond what cameras capture, there may be forces, incentives, and systems guiding the direction of events. Some people have started noticing this. In fact, tech entrepreneur Elon Musk once commented that in politics, many people seem to be playing their roles. That observation sparked huge debate online. Was he talking about political theater, institutional power, or something deeper? Because if you step back and look carefully at the world right now, something unusual becomes clear. Across the globe, multiple crises are unfolding at the same time. In the Gaza Strip, years of conflict have devastated infrastructure and displaced millions. In Ukraine, a grinding war continues to reshape global alliances and military strategy. In Sudan, humanitarian agencies warn that one of the largest displacement crises in modern history is unfolding. Meanwhile, unrest and instability continue in places like Myanmar and Haiti. Each crisis has its own causes, its own history. But taken together, they form a picture of a world under extraordinary pressure. Add to that economic uncertainty, rapidly advancing artificial intelligence, surveillance technologies expanding across cities, and governments exploring digital currency systems. For many people, it feels like the entire structure of the modern world is shifting. And when enough changes happen at once, people start asking a deeper question. Is this just history unfolding normally? Or are we watching the early stages of something much larger? For thousands of years, humans have tried to understand patterns in global events. Philosophers studied cycles of civilizations rising and falling. Historians analyze the forces that trigger wars and revolutions. But there is another source that claimed long ago that world history is not random at all. That source is the Bible. And according to the New Testament, the deepest conflicts shaping human history may not be political, economic, or military. They may be spiritual. In one passage, the Apostle Paul writes that humanity's real struggle is not against flesh and blood, not against other human beings, but against unseen powers operating behind the visible world. That idea appears in the book of Ephesians. Epistle to the Ephesians describes a reality where invisible forces influence the course of human affairs. To modern ears, that might sound symbolic, but for early Christians, it was a literal description of the structure of reality. And that belief leads directly to one of the most controversial figures in religious history. A being the Bible describes as brilliant, powerful, and deeply rebellious. A being whose story begins long before human civilization. His name is Lucifer. But to understand why this figure appears again and again in discussions about global power, technology, and the future of humanity, we need to go back much further. Back before modern nations, before empires, before even the earliest recorded civilizations. Because according to ancient texts, the conflicts shaping our world today may have begun in a place far beyond Earth. And if that story is true, then what we are seeing unfold in our time might not be random events at all. It might be the latest chapter in a much older war. To understand the deeper narrative many believers see unfolding in history, we have to go back to some of the most mysterious passages in the Bible. Long before human civilizations rose and fell, before kings ruled nations and armies marched across continents, Scripture describes the existence of powerful spiritual beings. Among them was one described as extraordinary. In the book of Ezekiel, a passage describes a figure who was full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. This being is portrayed as walking among what the text calls stones of fire on the holy mountain of God. Many theologians believe this passage symbolically refers to Lucifer before his fall. According to this interpretation, Lucifer was not originally an enemy of God. He was one of the most magnificent beings ever created, brilliant, powerful, radiant. But another ancient passage tells the rest of the story. In the book of Isaiah, a poetic description captures a moment of rebellion. 5 times the figure declares his ambition. I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars. I will make myself like the Most High. In other words, pride entered the heart of a being who already possessed immense power. And according to the biblical narrative, that pride triggered a cosmic rebellion. Lucifer was cast out. But the story does not end there. Scripture suggests that this conflict did not simply disappear. Instead, it continued to unfold throughout human history. In the New Testament, passages describe a spiritual adversary influencing deception, temptation, and corruption within the world. This figure is often identified with Satan, the adversary. And according to the second epistle to the Corinthians, he is described as the God of this age, who blinds the minds of those who cannot see truth clearly. For believers who take these passages literally, the implication is profound. Human history is not only shaped by human decisions, it may also be influenced by a deeper spiritual conflict. That idea raises a fascinating question. If a spiritual adversary truly sought influence over the world, how would that influence appear? Would it be obvious? Or would it operate quietly through systems of power, institutions, and human ambition? Some interpreters believe the Bible offers a dramatic answer to that question in one of its most famous prophetic texts. A vision describing a global system of power, control, and allegiance. A system connected to a mysterious number, 666. To understand what that number represents, we have to look at the final book of the New Testament. And that is where the story becomes even more startling. Nearly 2,000 years ago, a man named John recorded one of the most mysterious visions in religious history. The vision appears in the book of Revelation, written while John was exiled on the island of Patmos. In this vision, John describes a future global system of authority unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. According to the passage, this system would exercise influence over every nation, tribe, language, and people. But one particular part of the vision has fascinated readers for centuries. Revelation chapter 13 describes a requirement placed on humanity, a mark associated with allegiance to the system. Without this mark, people would be unable to buy or sell. The passage concludes with a cryptic statement. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. For centuries, interpreters debated what this could possibly mean. In the ancient world, a system controlling all commerce would have been unimaginable. Global communication networks did not exist. Digital finance did not exist. Biometric identification systems did not exist. But in the modern world, technology has changed that landscape dramatically. Governments and financial institutions are now exploring central bank digital currencies, often called CBDCs. These systems could allow money to exist entirely in digital form. Supporters say such systems could improve efficiency and reduce fraud. Critics warn they could also allow unprecedented levels of financial monitoring and control. At the same time, biometric technologies, facial recognition, fingerprint scanning, identity chips, are becoming increasingly common. Artificial intelligence systems are capable of analyzing enormous datasets about human behavior. To some observers, these developments resemble the kind of centralized control system ancient prophecy described. Others argue the comparison is exaggerated, and that technology simply reflects human innovation. But regardless of interpretation, one thing is undeniable. Human civilization now possesses technological capabilities that were unimaginable for most of history. Capabilities that could potentially connect, track, and regulate economic activity on a global scale. For many believers, that possibility makes the warnings of Revelation feel suddenly more relevant. Yet the final chapters of the biblical story do not end with darkness. The same book that describes the rise of a powerful system also describes its eventual downfall. Revelation later portrays the return of a figure described as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, a symbol of divine justice restoring order to a broken world. For believers, this ending represents hope. The message is not simply about fear or control. It is about endurance, faith, and the belief that evil systems, no matter how powerful they appear, do not ultimately prevail. Whether one interprets these passages literally, symbolically, or historically, they continue to shape how millions of people understand the unfolding of history. And they leave us with one haunting question. Are the events of our time simply another chapter of human history? Or are we witnessing the early stages of something that ancient writers believed would one day encompass the entire world? Only time will tell. But the conversation about prophecy, power, and the future of humanity is far from over. If this perspective made you think differently about the world around you, subscribe for more explorations into history, prophecy, and the forces shaping our future. And tell me in the comments, what part of this story surprised you the most?